hands! Hands in the air! 217, give me the air. I got a male shooting another male, a Wild. Running through the backyard, 123 Wild. Show me your fucking hands! Show me your hands! Hands in the air! Hands in the air! Hands in the fucking air! 217, I got shots fired. Shots fired in the backyard. Blue shots fired, give me the air. Get on! Do not fucking move! Do not fucking move! 217. All right, hey. All right, everybody, I'm gonna holster up. I'm gonna cuff this guy, hold cover on him. Don't you fucking move, gun right there. Hey, sir! Hey!
157.
Hey, I need cuffs.
I need clarification. How many ambulances do I need and how many people down?
Suspect shot too. Start 2 rigs for now.
We have an ambulance coming. Okay, any blue shots fired or all between them?
West Palm Beach, Florida, a city on the Atlantic coast, where the sun shines on the white sand, and the peaceful residential areas seem never to be tainted with violence. But in the summer of 2020, this place witnessed a heartbreaking tragedy that many people could not forget. The victim was Kaylee McCrae, a young woman who was only 18 years old. At the age of 20, Kaylee was still drawing the first strokes of her life. She had a loving family, close friends, and a bright future ahead. However, everything ended in a terrifying moment when a sweet love turned into a nightmare and violence exploded right in the house where she should have been the safest. Kaylee's death was not just a personal tragedy. It raised a series of painful questions. Why was such a young girl, with so many opportunities, caught up in a spiral of control and violence? Why weren't the warning signs, the texts, the posts, even the calls for help enough to save her? And ultimately, why did the domestic violence victim protection system allow such a tragedy to happen? In this documentary series, we'll look back at every moment in Kaylee's life, from the light of her youth to her dark love to that fateful night. Over 6 episodes, the picture becomes clear. At once, romantic and dangerous, heartbreaking and sobering. This isn't just a case, it's a reminder. Domestic violence doesn't always start with a punch, but sometimes it starts with the sweetest words. And as you listen to this story, you might wonder, if someone had spoken up sooner, would Kaylee McCrae still be here today? West Palm Beach, Florida, summer 2020. In the idyllic seaside neighborhoods, there is a young girl with a bright smile, sparkling eyes, and a heart that is always open to everyone around her. Her name is Kaylee McCrae, only 18 years old. For many, that is the best time of their lives. Mature enough to be free, but still intact with the innocence and enthusiasm of youth. Kaylee grew up in the loving arms of her family. She is not a person who stands out in the crowd, but wherever she goes, her presence always brings warmth. Friends often say that Kaylee has the ability to turn a bad day into a light one with just a smile. She is not fussy, does not like noise, but always knows how to listen and share. It is that sincerity that makes everyone love her. Since childhood, Kaylee has been an emotional child. She often helped her mother with housework, took care of her younger siblings, and was always the pride of her family. Relatives described her as a smart, gentle, but also determined girl. Kaylee had a simple dream: to get a good education, have a stable job, and later build a happy family. In high school, Kaylee was not the best student, but she worked hard and was trusted by her teachers. Her friends remember her as a trustworthy friend. Whoever needed help, she was always ready to be there. Some people said that Kaylee often quietly stood up to mediate whenever her friends had conflicts. That was her nature, always choosing gentleness over confrontation, always believing that everyone deserves a chance to change. Outside of the classroom, Kaylee was a young woman who enjoyed simple pleasures. She loved walking on the beach, listening to music, and taking pictures of everyday life. On social media, her image is full of positive energy, selfies with bright smiles, happy statuses about friends and life. Looking at them, no one would think that just a short time later, everything would disappear in a tragedy. At the age of 18, Kaylee began to clearly feel the desire to be independent. She told her mother that she wanted to study and work part-time, wanted to have experiences to become more mature. Like many other young girls, Kaylee also longed for love, a sweet, romantic, and promising love. She believed that love could bring happiness, comfort, and a spiritual support in difficult days. Friends said that Kaylee was inherently trusting, especially in love. She saw the good in people, and sometimes that trust made her vulnerable. But at that time, Kaylee had no idea that her trust would lead to an irreparable mistake. Before meeting her lover, Kelly's life was quite peaceful. She had a group of close friends who often gathered after school to eat and hang out. They remembered Kelly as the soul of the group. She was not the most talkative, but she was the one who made everyone feel connected. Every time Kelly was absent, her friends felt like something was missing. Kaylee's family also kept in their hearts countless beautiful memories. Her mother once said, "She was like sunshine in the house. No matter what happened, as long as I saw her smile, I knew I would be okay." To her loved ones, Kelly was not just a young girl, but a future, a hope. But then, like a strange wind blowing, Kaylee's life began to take a different turn. When she entered her first love, at first everything seemed perfect. The care, the sweet words, the promises of a future together. Kelly, like many other girls, was lost in the intoxication of love. She believed that she had found someone special, someone who was willing to accompany her through her formative years. Friends had seen her brighten up when talking about her lover. In Kaylee's eyes, that love was like a beautiful dream. But no one expected that, hidden under that sweet shell, was a controlling and violent reality, something that would soon turn the dream into a nightmare. At that time, no one could have imagined that the 8-year-old girl with so many dreams would have to leave so soon. The next part of the story will show how that love began, and the first signs that it was not healthy. Unfortunately, it was too late for Keely to realize. At 18, Keely McRae was like any other young girl, dreamy, yearning for love, and believing that love could fill the void of adulthood. When she started dating, her friends saw the joy that radiated from Keely's smile. She shared sweet text messages, casual but romantic dates, and the promises of first love. At first, it was like a romance novel. Keely's boyfriend was always there, sending her goodnight texts, asking how she was doing at school, if she got home safely. For Keely, it was a feeling of being protected, of being at the center of someone else's heart. In her young eyes, it was the kind of love every teenage girl longed for. Friends remember Keely smiling when she mentioned him. She said he was different, gentler, more caring, and made her feel special. At first, the relationship was like a breath of fresh air, making Kaylee more optimistic and confident in the future. But then, faint signs of control began to appear. At first, it was just seemingly harmless questions. Where are you? Who are you with? Why don't you reply to my messages right away? Keely thought it was just concern, and even felt happy to be noticed. But friends began to notice something unusual. A close friend recalled. He was always on his phone, replying to messages immediately. If he didn't, she started to worry, afraid that he would get angry. The concern gradually turned into control. Kaylee's lover began to want to know every little detail of her life. Where she went, what she did, who she was with. If Kelly didn't report it, he would act cold or angry. Meetings with friends gradually became less frequent, because Kaylee often had to decline at the last minute. She said her boyfriend didn't like her going out too much, or that he needed her around. To outsiders, these were clear signs of a toxic relationship. But to Kelly, it was all covered up by a veneer of love. She thought it was evidence of commitment, that he did it because he cared too much. In a social media post, Keely once wrote, "He wants me around all the time, and I feel so lucky." Gradually, the sweet words were replaced by accusations. When Kelly didn't answer her phone, he became unreasonably jealous. When she wanted to go out with her friends, he assumed she didn't love him anymore. When she wore a dress he didn't like, Keely was criticized and told to change. These little things added up, eroding Keely's freedom and joy of life. Friends began to notice her smiling less, appearing less at gatherings. They asked directly, but Keely simply replied, "He's just a little protective, nothing more." Fear had begun to creep into her life, but Keely herself had not yet named it. The climax came when the arguments turned from words to actions. At one point, he threw Kaylee's phone in anger. One time, neighbors heard loud arguments, mixed with banging sounds in the house where the two lived. Kaylee had to explain to her family many times that it was just a normal argument. But the truth was not so simple. The signs of violence began to become more obvious. At one point, friends saw a small bruise on Kaylee's hand, but she quickly found an excuse to hide it. When asked, she smiled wryly, "I just tripped." But the evasive look said it all, yet the spiral of control continued. After each outburst, he returned with sweet apologies, flowers, promises to change, begs her not to leave, and Kelly, with her kind heart, forgave, believing that next time would be different. But next time was never different. Kelly's first love, from a romantic dream, turned into a cage. She no longer had the freedom to choose, no longer herself. The bright days were gradually replaced by fear, pressure, and isolation. However, what was even more frightening were the warnings from social media. In many posts, Kelly's lover revealed excessive possessiveness, even language that implied violence. Friends read it but were not sure whether to intervene or not. They were afraid of making Keely feel awkward, afraid of being seen as meddling in her personal affairs. And in that silence, the dangerous spiral tightened. If someone had dared to speak up more strongly at that time, if someone had intervened in time, perhaps the story would have been different. But in reality, it was not. The danger signs had appeared, but they were all ignored. And then, it led straight to a tragedy that no one expected. At the end of this journey, Kelly still believed that love could be saved, but the audience, when looking back, will clearly see. It was no longer love, but a time bomb, and it was only a matter of time before it exploded, taking the young girl's life. The sweet early days passed, giving way to a harsh reality. After the jealousy and arguments, Kazian Shaw's control no longer stopped at words. It turned into action, violence, threats, and outbursts that Kaylee McCrae could not stop. At 18, she never thought she would become a victim of domestic violence. But in her own home, a place that should have been safe. Kaylee had to live like in a trap. Relatives began to notice the change. One time, when visiting, Kaylee's mother saw a faint bruise on her daughter's arm. Kaylee quickly denied it, saying she had tripped, but her trembling voice and evasive eyes made her mother uneasy. Friends said that Kaylee gradually became reserved. On her once radiant face, there was now a constant look of fatigue. In the messages, she lamented that she needed to get out, but then quickly deleted them, replacing them with, "It's okay, I'm fine." But the truth was not okay. Shaw repeatedly threw things and smashed things around the house. One time, he jumped on the hood of Kelly's car, knocked on the window, and screamed in broad daylight as she tried to drive away. The scene scared Keely so much that she posted the video on social media, captioning it, "This is the scariest moment of my life." In today's world, statuses and stories on social media are often seen as temporary emotions. But for Keely, it was her way of leaving a mark, proof of the truth she was going through. In one post, she wrote, "If anything happens to me, he's the one who did it." That was no joke. That was no teenage tantrum. It was a clear, desperate warning to anyone who cared about her. Friends were worried when they read it. But many thought Keely was exaggerating. Some were afraid to interfere in her private love life. It was this hesitation that inadvertently left Kelly to face her nightmare alone. In early 2024, the situation became more serious. Shaw not only controlled her, he began threatening her with weapons. At one point, Kelly told a close friend that Shaw had held a gun to her head and whispered, "If you leave me, we'll both die." The story was like a prophecy, but at the time, no one believed it would come true. The arguments between the two became more and more intense. Neighbors heard screaming and the sound of broken furniture in the house. Some people called the police. But when they arrived, Kelly said it was all a misunderstanding. It was a familiar cycle for many victims of domestic violence, fear and hope that their partner would change. On the 5th of March, 2024, just one day before the murder, Kelly finally spoke up. In a sobbing 911 call, she reported that Shaw had strangled her, held a gun to her head, and held her in the house against her will. Keely's trembling voice was filled with fear. This was no longer a romantic conflict, but a real threat to her life. The police took note. They had seen the videos, the evidence Keely had provided. A warrant was issued for Shaw's arrest on charges of aggravated assault with a firearm and domestic violence by strangulation. In Kelly's eyes, this should have been the turning point. She had done everything right: call the police, provide evidence, identify the person who had threatened her. But reality was cruel. The police searched for Shaw, but he escaped. Once, they almost caught him, but Shaw slipped away into the night. And so, he remained free, while Kelly continued to live in fear. That night, Kelly sat alone in her room, probably thinking that everything would be okay, that the police would catch him soon, that tomorrow she could breathe a sigh of relief. But the truth was different. The whole world knew about the danger she was facing, but no one could stop it. The victim protection system had failed. Again, Keely had left enough traces. The injuries, the statuses, the videos, and finally the SOS call. But all of them were like puzzle pieces that couldn't be put together. Before the tragedy happened, the night of the 5th of March passed in silence. But that silence was like the storm before it hit. Because just one day later, All of Keely's warnings, all of her tears for help, turned into horrible reality. On FaceTime with friends, in what seemed like the safest moment, Kelly was faced with her worst nightmare. And this time, there was no chance of escape. The 6th of March, 2024. To most people, it would be just another night. But to Kelly McRae, it would be the last day of her short life. The small house in West Palm Beach was quiet, but the atmosphere that day was suffocatingly heavy. Keely had a bad feeling. She had had a long day, and her mind was in turmoil. Just yesterday, she had called 911, reporting Kaizian Shaw for violence and threats with a gun. The police promised to take action, but Shaw was still at large, and with his hot-tempered, vengeful personality, Keely knew he would not let it go. Seeking some peace, Kaylee turned on FaceTime to chat with her friends. The laughter, the random chatter, and the familiar faces on the screen helped her relax. It was one of the rare moments when Kaylee felt like she was not alone. The back door swung open. Kaizian Shaw walked in, his face cold, his hand holding a gun. No one could have guessed that Kelly's friends, through the phone screen, would become witnesses to the tragedy that was about to happen. In that moment, Keely's voice was lost. "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" Friends heard it clearly, panicked through the screen. They shouted, "Run, Kelly! Get out of there!" But it was too late. Shaw stepped forward, the gun pointed straight at Keely. The loud bang broke the silence of the night. 1, then 2, then 3 shots. Kaylee's face flashed in horror for a moment, then disappeared from the frame. The phone fell, spinning on the floor, recording the chaos. Screams, stomping, and finally deathly silence. On the other side, Kelly's friends screamed. They helplessly witnessed the death of their loved one through a video call, unable to do anything but call the police in panic. Minutes later, patrol cars roared into the neighborhood, sirens blaring. Red and blue lights flashed off the walls, reflecting in the panicked eyes of neighbors who had spilled out into the street. News of the gunshots spread quickly, and in a few moments, it was clear to everyone. The tragedy Kaylee had feared had happened. When the police broke down the door, the scene was nightmarish. Kelly lay motionless on the floor, covered in blood. The phone was still on FaceTime, and on the other end, friends were sobbing silently. Kaizian Shaw was gone. He fled into the night, leaving behind a wound that would never heal in the hearts of his family and community. News of Kaylee's death spread quickly throughout West Palm Beach, then beyond Florida. Social media was flooded with tributes of grief. Images of the young girl, bright eyes and radiant smile, were shared thousands of times with the hashtag number Justice for Keely. But alongside the grief, there was also outrage. People asked, how could a girl call for help multiple times, even call 911 and provide evidence, only to be killed just a day later? Where was the system when she needed it most? She called for help. No one listened. This is not just Keely's tragedy, it's a failure of society. How many more people have to die before domestic violence is taken seriously? For Keely's family, the pain was beyond words. The mother, who had noticed the bruises on her daughter's arms but was reassured with a forced smile, now had to face the harsh truth. Her daughter would never come back. Keely's father, a man of few words, sat silently at the press conference, his eyes red. He only said one short sentence, but it made everyone silent. She believed that the police would protect her. But in the end, we had to receive her coffin. Friends who witnessed the incident on FaceTime could not forget that terrifying moment. They carried within them the haunting memory, the sound of gunfire, the image of Kaylee collapsing, like a psychological wound that would never heal. One of them told the press, "I saw the death happen right in front of my eyes, on the phone screen. We screamed, we begged her to run, but everything was too fast." That feeling of helplessness will stay with me for the rest of my life. Violence is not just a private matter. Kaylee McRae's death is not just a personal tragedy. It has become a wake-up call for American society about violence in young love. Many experts say there is a huge gap in the way domestic violence is handled. Victims often have to prove themselves dangerous, and even when they do, the system is slow. Kaylee's case is the clearest example. She spoke out many times, but was still not protected in time. That night, when Kelly's body was removed from the house, the whole neighborhood stood still. People mourned for the young girl, but also were angry at the injustice. Kezian Shaw is still on the run. But even if he is caught, that will not bring Kaylee back. The bigger question remains: how many more cries for help will continue to be ignored before society truly changes? The tragedy on FaceTime is not just a murder. It is a mirror of the cruel truth. Sometimes, you can scream for help in front of thousands of people, but still die in silence, because no one has time to help. On the night of the 6th of March, 2024, when police arrived at the crime scene, Kelly McRae had no signs of life. The 8-year-old girl, full of dreams and aspirations, collapsed in her own home. The tragic scene not only haunted her family and friends, but also shocked the entire West Palm Beach community. Kezian Shaw immediately became the prime suspect. All the evidence pointed to him, from the testimony of friends who witnessed the crime via FaceTime, to police reports from the day before, and even Keely's social media statuses. The police launched a large-scale manhunt. Shaw's portrait was distributed across local media channels. Patrol cars searched every corner. Helicopters hovered overhead. Residents were advised, "If you see Shaw, do not approach. He is considered armed and extremely dangerous." But Shaw, who had repeatedly run from the law, disappeared. Some sources said he was hiding in Miami. Others claimed to have seen him in Georgia. As time went on, the manhunt became a tense game between the police and a reckless, violent man. News of the case quickly spread, not only in Florida but also across the United States. Major newspapers such as the Miami Herald and the New York Post simultaneously reported, calling Kelly's death a predictable tragedy. Because the truth was so obvious, Kaylee had called for help, called the police, left evidence, but the system still let her die. And that is what made the public angry. On social media platforms, the hashtag number Justice for Keely appeared, shared hundreds of thousands of times. Videos Kelly had posted of Shaw's violent behavior went viral, becoming living proof of her ignored pleas for help. One netizen wrote, "She did everything a victim of domestic violence should do: speak up, seek help, call the police." But in the end, what changed? Nothing. And now, she's in a coffin. At Kaylee's funeral, hundreds of people came to say goodbye. The small church in West Palm Beach was too small to hold. Many people had to stand outside, crying as they watched the white coffin being carried in. Keely's mother, her face haggard from days of sleepless nights, stood before her daughter's altar and whispered, "I'm sorry, Keely. I couldn't save you." Her father sat silently, clutching his daughter's portrait. To him, the police's promises, the legal procedures, were now just meaningless words. He only knew one thing: his daughter was murdered, and nothing could change that. The West Palm Beach community refused to stand still. A small protest was held in front of the police station, with signs reading, "Justice for Kaylee. Domestic violence cannot be ignored. How many more lives will be lost?" Angry residents asked. Why didn't the police arrest Shaw immediately after the 911 call? Why wasn't an arrest warrant enough to protect an 18-year-old girl? And why, during the months that Kaylee cried out for help, did no one intervene in time? Domestic violence experts were invited to appear on television shows to analyze the situation. They all agreed that it was a failed system. A lawyer told CNN, "When a victim reports a gun to her head, it's not just domestic violence. It's a threat to her life, and it needs to be addressed urgently." But here, the police just issued an arrest warrant and left her to face the danger. A sociologist added, "Domestic violence is often seen as a private matter, but in fact, it is a community issue. If we do not act, stories like Keely's will continue to happen." Keely's friends, who were unwilling witnesses, are still haunted. One of them shared, "Every time I close my eyes, I see that moment. I heard the gunshots, saw Kelly fall. I wish I could touch the screen, pull her out, but we were powerless." Many of them have started to participate in campaigns to raise awareness about violence in young love. They want Keely's story to be a wake-up call, so that no one else has to witness their friend die through a phone screen. While the community is outraged, the police continue to hunt for Kaylee and Shaw. With each passing day, the pressure is mounting. Public opinion demands answers. When will he be caught? A multi-state manhunt was launched. A federal warrant was issued. Shaw's name was on bulletin boards, at gas stations, bus stations, airports. No place was safe for him, and no one knew where he was. Every night on the news, Kelly's image appeared. Bright eyes, innocent smile. But with that came the painful question: if the system had worked properly, would she still be alive? And that is what made Kaylee's death go beyond a criminal case. It became a symbol of the legal system's inability to deal with domestic violence. Kaylee's death spread like wildfire. Families in other states began to look at their own children. Teenage girls in controlling relationships. Schools and community organizations held workshops, asking, "Are we really listening to our kids?" Somewhere, another girl may be typing the same status. Keely wrote, "If anything happens to me, he's the culprit." And everyone hopes that, this time, society will not ignore it. The funeral is over, but the pain is still raw. Fresh flowers are still placed on Kelly McRae's grave every day. The people of West Palm Beach have not forgotten. Her friends have not forgotten. And her family, certainly, will never forget. But most importantly, Kaylee's story has become an icon, a powerful reminder of the cost of silence and delay, an unexpected legacy. Kaylee was not an activist, nor a public figure. She was just an 18-year-old girl, loving life, loving her family, with simple dreams. But her death sparked a movement. On social media, the hashtag number Justice for Keely is more than a call for justice for an individual. It has become a place for thousands of other victims of domestic violence to share their stories. Tearful statuses, confessions that had been hidden for years, began to appear. I called 911 too, but they just said they would look into it. I also had a gun held to my head, but no one believed me. Kaylee is not just her. Kaylee is all of us. Kaylee's legacy is one of awakening. Her story forces people to look at the truth. Violence in young love is not uncommon, and sometimes it is deadly. Pressure for reform. After Kaylee's death, Florida lawmakers came under great pressure from public opinion. Many organizations called for new laws, requiring police to act more quickly in cases of domestic violence involving weapons. A state senator said, "It is not possible for a young woman to call for help, report a gun threat, and be killed within 24 hours. This is not only a failure of the system, but a betrayal of the citizenry." There are bills proposed to shorten response times, increase protections for victims, and especially provide emergency shelter for people like Kelly, who know their abuser will not stop. Family refuses to be silent. Instead of wallowing in grief, Kelly's family decided to turn their loss into action. They created a fund called Kelly's Voice Foundation, which supports young victims of violent relationships. Kaylee's mother said at a press conference, "She tried to speak up, but no one listened. Now, we are going to make sure that the voices of others are not ignored." The foundation funds a 24/7 hotline, offers free counseling, and holds workshops in schools on recognizing signs of violence. They want to prevent similar tragedies before it's too late. Friends turn grief into action. Friends who witnessed Kelly's death on FaceTime have also joined the movement. They recounted their experiences on television, hoping that no one else will have to go through the same feeling of helplessness. "We can't save Kelly," said one, "but we can save others if people listen and act." They became speakers at community events, reminding young people, "Love never comes with control and violence. If you feel threatened, leave before it's too late." Lessons for society. Kaylee's death has left many bitter lessons. Domestic violence is not a private matter. It's a social issue, and everyone has a responsibility to speak up. Small signs shouldn't be ignored. A bruise, a desperate status, a cry for help. All can be warnings of an impending tragedy. The legal system needs to change. Arrest warrants, procedures, all are meaningless if not enforced promptly. Safe love education. Young people need to be taught the difference between care and control, between love and possession. A message that never fades. At 18, Kelly McRae is gone, but her story lives on. Every time someone shares her post with the hashtag number Justice for Keely, every time another victim reaches out to the hotline for help, it's proof that Keely is still making a difference. Her story isn't just about death, it's about awareness. It forces us all to ask ourselves, if we were in the shoes of Kelly's friends, or the police, or our neighbors, would we have done anything differently? And most importantly, what would we do today to prevent another Kaylee from dying? A peaceful evening in West Palm Beach turned into a nightmare, claiming the life of an innocent young woman. But from that pain, a movement has sprung. Keely's legacy is not her tragic death, but the change that is being driven, the thousands of voices that are being heard. As you read this story, remember, love should never be accompanied by violence. If you or someone you love is in a toxic relationship, speak up. Because speaking up might save a life. Kelly McRae is no longer here to tell her story, but through us, her voice will never be silenced.